The final exam is a week after Thanksgiving.
A week after Thanksgiving, okay.
Yeah, the week immediately after Thanksgiving, yeah. All right. I mean, it's not a final, really speaking. It is just the third exam. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about how functions work. So, oops. So if you have a bunch of statements, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, fairly trivial statements. This is just for an example. You can group all this and then give it a name. So you write define and then give some name. It should start with a letter or underscore, but for this class, you should always start with a lowercase letter and give it a name like this. So put the word define, DEF, then give a name that looks like a variable. Okay. So the rules for forming variables also apply for function names. Then put the left and right parentheses and put the column. And then you have all these statements here. They should all be indented. Of course, if you have an if statement here, if less than B, then B equals 2, then this statement is indented, right? So all these are indented at the same position. This is indented because we have an if statement and so on. So all the indentation rules apply. Okay.
Mr. Brahman, on the last line, do you write A equal 2 or is that a D?
The last line here,
Yeah.
I have here D equals 2.
Okay.
Yeah, it was indented because it is part of the if condition. So that is essentially what a function is, a group of statements with a name. And you say that we are defining a function by writing diff or def or whatever you want to call it. This is short for define, and put a space here. You need a space and then you give a name. And parentheses are required and then you need a column. That is what a function looks like. But when Python sees this, it simply says, okay, I have a function and its name is my function. And it says, okay, these are the statements associated with the function. But these statements are not executed. It's like you're writing a program, and simply writing a program doesn't mean that it is going to get executed. You have to press the function key F5, right? Similarly here, writing a function doesn't mean that it is going to be executed. You have to call it. So at this indentation, you write my function and put parentheses. Then this is an executable statement. This is not a function definition, obviously, because you don't have define. And this is aligned with the D of define. So the function is ending here with this statement. So this makes a call or invocation.
So for the lab, is it going to be, are we going to use define functions?
For what?
For the lab, are we going to use define functions?
Yes.
Okay.
In this lab, you'll be defining functions, yes, and calling them. So this calls my function, it gets executed, and then once it finishes execution, control comes back. So let's,
That's the message.
what is that?
That is the message, the last line there.
I didn't get, what is that?
Is that the message?
Methods?
Message.
We are not talking about methods here, we're talking about functions.
Oh yeah. I'm saying so the my function with the two parentheses on the last line, that's the one that's getting called, right?
The last line is calling this function.
Yep. Okay.
So it is all calling or invoking the function. That is the only way to get this code executed. So my function with parentheses tells Python that this function should be executed. So Python goes here and executes all these statements and comes back. So let's take another example. Define A, P equals 3. Define B, Q equals 2, A, and suppose we write B here. So there are two functions now. The first function is named A. Python knows that this is a function because there is a word defined here. And this statement goes with this function, A. So when Python reads your program, this is the first thing it sees, then it says, okay, there is a function called A. It remembers that. And it says P equals 3 is associated with this. Then it sees the next line, and it sees that this D is aligned with this D. So it knows that this function is over. There is nothing more left as statements of this function. Then it says, okay, there is another function coming here because it sees this word define, and then says, okay, the name of the function is B. Then it attaches these two lines of code to this function. We will call this function header, and this the body of the function. Header, and this is the body. Then Python sees the last line here, B, with parentheses, and this B is aligned with this D here. So it knows that this is the end of this function. Because if this were indented, it would have become part of the function. But since it is not indented, this is the end of the function B. Then it looks at this and it says B parentheses. The parentheses tell Python that this function B should be called. So Python, let me put one more statement here, a print statement, end. So this makes Python go here, execute the statements here. It creates a variable called Q, gives it the value 2. Then it comes to the next line and it sees A. What is A? It sees that A is a function. So it goes to A and sets P to 3, creates a variable called P, sets it to 3. That is the end of the function. So it comes back. The technical word is return. It returns to B, but there is nothing more to be done here. So B returns to where it was called. So this function is, or call is over. Then it goes to the next line and it prints end. That is the end of the program now. Any questions? Let me put one more line here. Let's say R equals 5. One more line in this function body. Okay. Then what happens when, okay, let's follow through this again. When B is called, this piece of code is suspended. It is kind of hanging, all right? Then B gets executed, in which A gets called. So this is hanging, B is hanging. Then A gets executed. When it finishes, control goes back, the function returns, and then this is resumed. B is resumed, and it executes this line, then goes back to where it came from, and it continues here with the print statement. These function calls are kind of temporary. They execute only when they are called, and when they finish, there is almost no trace of them. Okay, that execution, right? Any questions, anyone, on this stuff? Okay, now to give you a little more perspective, you have used print so many
Brahma,
times. Yes.
after you're done explaining this, could I ask you something about the assignment 9?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me just finish this.
Yep.
You have written this kind of stuff a lot. This is actually a function, all right? And you are putting parentheses after print to indicate that it is the print function that you are calling. And this is called an argument or parameter. Okay. We will study arguments and parameters next week. Or int is a function. Input is a function. Okay. X equals input. And this is a function call. You're passing a parameter that displays something on the screen, and this comes back with a value. This is a return value. It is bringing you something. It is bringing you a piece of text, whereas this doesn't give you anything back. Print doesn't return anything. It is sometimes called a void function. Whereas this brings back a string. This brings back a number. The range function returns or brings back a sequence, and so on. Okay, any questions? All right. Okay, let's talk about the assignment. Any question, Elian?
Could you pull it up and explain it, please?
Okay.
Because yeah, I'm a little bit confused with the assignment 9. I haven't started it yet.
Okay. All right. Let me. All right, this is the assignment. So what you need to do is read a number that is 5 or more, and it should be an odd number, and you should draw a K. So if you have 11 lines, you will have, I mean, if you accept a number that is like 11, you will have 11 rows here. So there will be 5 rows before the middle line, 5 rows after the middle line. And in the middle line, you will print 2 stars next to each other. Just above that, there is a line with 2 stars, and there are 2 spaces between them. And just below the middle line, there are 2 stars with 2 spaces between them. This line has 4 stars, and so does this one. Sorry, 4 spaces. I didn't mean stars. 4 spaces between the stars. There are 4 spaces between the stars here too. Then if you go one more line up and one more line down, you have 6 spaces. Then 8 and then 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Similarly, 2 spaces, 4 spaces, 6 spaces, 8 spaces, 10 spaces. That is what is required. Questions? All right, if you don't have any questions, let's stop this. I'm going to stop recording, and we will start the class exercise.